Welcome. Very, very glad to be here. Welcome to the last of the season, where we kind of tie everything up in a bow. We're really excited that you have joined us. Stu, it's good to have this opportunity to discuss these great issues with you. We appreciate everything that you've done. Again, my name is Greg Schrock. I am a lay expert in these matters. Really enjoy talking about these things. Stu has been dedicating his life for decades to pursuing the big questions of life, and he has done a lot of research and is just a wealth of knowledge, and it's just a privilege to be able to interact. So, yes, thank you so much for coming. So what we're going to do first, Stu has asked me to kind of give an overview of Socrates at Saddlebrook and where we've kind of come over this past, well, really, the whole time, right? I mean, really, this is the third season. And this is kind of tying it up in a bow, all three seasons.
It started off as 7 sessions and turned into 27.
27, there you go. And it probably could go way longer. There's a lot of material. So Socrates at Saddlebrook is all about the big questions of life. For 3 seasons, we addressed these by researching what science has to say. Has science rediscovered a creator? That's been the overarching theme for the series. We probed 5 major scientific discoveries of the last 50 to 70 years. We used the scientific method of inference to the best explanation. So we look at the evidence and we try to infer, where does the evidence point? We ask questions like, what does the scientific evidence show? What direction does the evidence point? And here's a key point. We try to follow that evidence with an open mind. We don't want to, ahead of time, determine where we don't want to go. We want to examine the evidence with a completely open mind and follow it. We presented, Stu mostly presented these results in the Socrates forums as posted on the website. And so we would highly encourage you, if you want more information on this, there's tons of good information on the website. We would encourage you to go and take your time going through that. Press pause, press play, digest, think, talk with people. It's really good stuff. We try to answer your questions here in the open forum, and there is a place to pose questions also on the website. If that's what you'd like to do, we respond to those. Our conclusion up to this point has been the God hypothesis is the best explanation. Science has, in fact, rediscovered a creator. So today we're completing the investigation by circling back to these big questions: who or what is God? And again, there's lots of material on the website. Please go there. If you do go there, you'll notice that the videos and the presentations are all numbered on the website. I'm sorry that this slideshow is so far away, and you may have some difficulty reading some of it, but there are little numbers attached to a bunch of these slides that will point you to the right place on the website. So if you see something in the slide that has a number 6 or something like that, you can go to the website, find the 6th presentation, and then you can click into there and get more information on that topic. We are going to be giving, and we have been giving, our conclusions on this. But the most important thing is that you draw your own conclusions. We're going to share with you where we think it leads, but you have to examine the evidence for yourself. We encourage an open mind, and then we encourage you to reach your own conclusions. How'd I do? Is that okay?
Sounds pretty good to me, Greg.
So today we are going to be talking about what or who is God. And so in order to answer this, we do find ourselves circling back to the questions that we posed at the very beginning. Has science rediscovered a creator? And how that answers the big questions of life.
This started off as a club exercise for me to kind of summarize where I've been going for 40 years, the things I've been studying. I have a background in both science and theology and a little bit in philosophy as well. And those 3 will have come together into this series of presentations. We started off with Socrates because he said, the unexamined life is not worth living. When I was in my mid-30s, I took that seriously. I mean, where is life going? You know, where did I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And not everybody thinks deeply like that, but I'm one of those kind of weird kids that did that thing while they were out playing baseball. I was asking those kind of questions. And I decided when Gail and I retired down here, well, why not just put all this together? She looked at my bookcase and said, "You have all that writing there and everything. What are you going to do with it?" I said, "Well, maybe we can start a club." And put out 7 presentations, and as I said, turned into 27. But those are the big questions of life. I think everybody has those kind of questions at some level, whether or not you sit and wade through the material for 4 decades. That's another question. Very few of us do that kind of thing. But it all hinges on, at the end of the day, is there a supreme being? Is there a God? 90% of the world believes that there's a God, but 90% of the Academy, National Academy of Sciences, are atheists. Explain that disconnect. That disconnect is, we're going to get into that today, why that is, but that is really the big question. And how we have been doing this is, like, as Greg has been mentioning, looking at evidence, not just conclusions and opinions. It seems like our whole world is about conclusions and opinions, and then yelling at the person who doesn't agree with you.
Ideology,
yes. Politics.
Yes.
What's in it. And so we've been looking at the actual scientific evidence. That's why it took 27 forums to put this together. Absolutely. Is what does the science say? And then weight it. And then if it points that direction, that we follow the evidence from the way it points.
Follow the evidence where it leads. And there is a ton of evidence out there for a creator. It's amazing. I had no idea back when I was in my 30s, I believed that there was a creator, but I had no idea that I had so much evidence to back me up. I got into this topic, and it just, the more you dig, the more evidence there really is. Both on the macro scale, you look in your telescope, you can see things at the distant edges of sight, but also at the micro scale. What do we have? Trillions of cells in our body, all of them doing things, little manufacturing machines. It's amazing how much evidence there is for an intelligent creator. And so I'm excited to be talking about that today. I think a real good place to start would be to go through those 5 pieces of evidence that we went in more depth over the course of the season, and kind of bring each of those up again. If you were here for any of those, you might recognize some of that. It's all repetition is always a good thing, but you might recognize some of it. Kind of give a little bit of the evidence again. But then what I'd like to do after each of those is I would like to actually answer today's question. What does that say about the creator? And so, like, as we look at these topics, we can say, okay, what attributes of a creator can we derive from what we're talking about? That's an added step that we really didn't talk about the rest of the season. So I thought maybe we could just get started with kind of going through that. Is that all right?
Great.
So the first one we talked about 5 sessions ago was we were talking about the origin of the universe, the beginning of the universe. Can you tell me what was previously thought about the beginning of the universe decades ago, and what is the current evidence now?
Well, when I was in school, it was just known that the universe was infinitely large, and it was infinitely static. It just was there. And that was what all the evidence pointed to, because we couldn't see beyond the Milky Way. We didn't even have telescopes until the power to see beyond the Milky Way until the beginning of the 20th century, when Mount Wilson in Pasadena was built. And then a lawyer turned astronomer by the name of Edward Hubble, that name sounds familiar to you, Hubble, went up and started photographing the skies and said, boy, what are those cloud dusts up there? Are they stars, or is that just dust? Well, it turned out that they were nebula, and they weren't even sure what that was. And then he started charting what those stars were doing, and he found out that they were redshifted. What the heck does that mean? Well, that means that they were actually moving away from us in all directions. All the stars were moving away from us. how does that make sense? That doesn't sound like static to me. That sounds like it's in motion.
Dynamic,
It's
yes.
dynamic. Then there was a scientist by the name of Albert Einstein. Anybody not heard of Albert Einstein? Albert Einstein, brilliant physicist, mathematician, came up with something called the general theory of relativity that explained space and time. Wow, that's a heavy one. We weren't sure what space and time were, but he came up with these relativistic equations. And these equations said that the universe was static and infinite. But when he looked at them, he put a fudge factor in there because that's what he believed philosophically, that it was static. A Belgian priest by the name of Georges Lemaitre, who was an astronomer and a priest for the Vatican, said, well, maybe that means that the universe is expanding. Maybe it had a beginning. And he worked out the mathematics with Einstein's own equations that showed that the universe had a beginning and published the material, and people ignored him in the 1920s. Until one day, the world-famous astronomer said, George, that stuff is right. I mean, I calculated. I don't believe it, but it's right. And they go and talk to Einstein in Pasadena. They meet with Hubble. It's kind of neat to go to the website and look at I have this whole story laid out for you. And Einstein heard a presentation by Lemaitre and said, that's the most beautiful explanation of my equations I've ever seen. And he went on to say that was the biggest mistake of his life to put that fudge factor in there. So that's why in the beginning of the 20th century, they thought that it was static because everybody just believed that ahead of time. They didn't have an open mind about it.
Static meaning unchanging and eternal.
Unchanging and eternal.
Yeah.
So there was no need for a God, right? If you have something,
if it was there forever.
It was there.
Yeah.
It was the end of the Y equations. You could go to Y and say stop. Well, that's it. We're a product of the universe. And you might have seen the series by Cosmos on Carl Sagan saying the cosmos is all there is and it's static and we're stardust and we're nothing but this, and there's no need for a creator. So they had materialism had this explanation of a beginning of the universe or of a static universe, but these equations said, well, it's expanding. So somebody, well, let's run it. If we run the equation backwards, what happens? There had to be a beginning to it, and worked out the redshifts and the observations, and sure enough, wow! But we couldn't prove that until the early 90s when we put up the Kobe satellite. And I'll show that a little bit. Here's what they originally thought, that there was a Big Bang, and that explanation, that 1000 there is the temperature that they calculated of the Big Bang. Has 25 or 30 zeros. We're not sure if it's 20. It doesn't make any difference, but that's the degrees it was above zero at the time of the explosion, 13.8 billion years ago. Called it a Big Bang because that's conceptually what comes to mind. But it wasn't until the Kobe satellite, until in the 1990s, when they took this picture on the right. And what's the picture on the right? Well, the equations predicted if the universe was expanding for that length of time, that it had to be, instead of trillions and trillions and trillions of degrees, it had cooled off to 2 degrees above absolute zero. In other words, absolute zero is the temperature of outer space. It was they said about 2 to 3 degrees. And look what the calculation showed. Kobe satellite came back, and they've been mapping this for the last 25 years. And
this is confirmatory evidence that the universe had a beginning.
That's one of the many evidences now.
And it gets stronger and stronger, doesn't it?
Have it to 15 decimal places, but wow. That's another thing.
So that's what we talked about the first session. I recognize some of you, and I think some of you heard that before. But what we're going to do is we're going to take it a step further now. So based on this evidence from the beginning of the universe, what does that say about a creator? Asking the question for today. Well, it says that the creator is uncaused because philosophically you have to have a first cause. That creator has to be immaterial because at the beginning of the universe, materiality was created. This creator has to be timeless and spaceless, because both time and space were created at the beginning of the universe. Obviously, whoever created this had to have been unimaginably powerful to create essentially everything. And interestingly, personal. Because we only know of one thing in the universe and all of existence that can make a decision to create something without it being caused to create it, and that is a volitional mind. And so this points to a personal creator.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you keep on asking the why question and so forth. You can't, the creator can't be in the universe, because it would have to be created by something in the universe. So it has to be transcendent.
Exactly. So the second session we talked about the fine-tuning of the universe. So can you tell us what was previously thought about the fine-tuning and what is current evidence showing today?
Well, we didn't know much beyond natural law and chance. I mean, those are the only two laws that we physicists had at the time. But natural law and chance was thought to be sufficient, even after the burst and so forth, to put everything together. So there was no need for a designing intelligence, let's put it that way. But the more we study the universe and everything, we see that it's an engineering marvel, let's put it that way, beyond an engineering marvel.
Beyond comprehension.
These things have to be so fine-tuned and to work together, otherwise nothing happens. And we've discovered over 250 now design parameters.
Is that how many there are now? 250.
And if anybody has an engineering background, no, you can't engineer something. You can't manufacture something without a design. And if you did, it's just cobbled together. It's going to, like a Rube Goldberg machine, it's going to break down. So these things are incredibly fine-tuned. Just one parameter, Greg, is the fine-tuning of the Earth, just the Earth, not the whole universe. The Earth has these 250 parameters, and they're all fine-tuned within a hairbreadth. I mean, some of them are within a few percentage, but some of them are millions and millions of a percentage. If it was off that way, everything would disappear.
And you're talking about fine-tuned for us to even exist in this universe ultimately.
We would not exist otherwise.
Yeah, I've heard that, some people say, well, maybe it would be some kind of another life form. If these things were not finely tuned, chemistry would not exist.
Physics
correct?
and chemistry wouldn't even exist.
They wouldn't even exist.
Right.
So a hair's breadth.
And there's like 21 fundamental constants, 4 really big ones, and they're fine-tuned within billions of a percentage. And where did they come from?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about that. You see number 3 up there on the screen. If you go to number 3 on the website, all the presentations on that whole fine-tuning exercise are theirs. And encourage you to go to the website and study the evidence.
And the fine-tuning didn't just happen for the Earth, which is incredibly fine-tuned, but even the initial constants and quantities that are baked into the universe itself, if they were off by, we cannot describe how, we always say just a hair's breadth. No, it's so much more exquisite than that, even baked into the beginning of the universe.
And some of these things are just unbelievable. I mean, people who are declared atheists just say that it's near miraculous, right?
Near miraculous, yes.
They can't call it miraculous because that would imply that they believe in God. But
I understand that Anthony Flew, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Anthony Flew, but he was a prominent atheist back in the 60s, 70s, maybe 80s.
When I was in school for 50 years, he was the chief atheistic philosopher.
He was,
go-to guy.
And before he died, he became a theist. And this was the argument that convinced him, that there is no way we could have such a finely tuned universe without some kind of an intelligence behind it.
And so many of the top scientists are coming to that conclusion now. You don't have to believe in that. We can't prove that in a logical sense, a total proof, but you can point to what does the evidence show.
Exactly.
And the evidence is pointing there. Here's just 2 of them, Greg, I put up on the screen. This is just the Earth going around the sun. The Earth is in what's called a habitable zone. If it was 2% closer, it'd be too close, we'd burn up. If it was 2% farther out, it'd be too cold. We couldn't exist that way. And Earth is just in the perfect position. The picture on the right there is how the moon was created. This is what we currently think of the moon was created. Because our moon is just so huge in comparison to what the astrophysics says about how big the moon should be. It's much, much bigger.
Compared to the planet it
Compared
circles.
to the planets and what the formulas say. There had to be some, like, I'll call it a supernatural event early on, maybe 3 or 4 billion years ago, and what they believe happened. And this is because we've been to the moon now, we have moon rocks, we can study this, we see foreign materials and so forth, that a small planetoid collided with the original Earth moon and created the moon that we have today. And that has to be that size for it to be remember the 23.5 degrees that is leaning over.
Earth. Yep.
And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have seasons.
No.
There wouldn't be the seasons at all. And if it wasn't exactly the right size, we wouldn't have the tidal cleansing that we have in the ocean.
And all these things are absolutely necessary for life, let alone advanced life like us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm really talking about the Earth. I put down one stat there at the bottom of the slide. Greg, you ever buy a lottery ticket?
I have not, but I know what they are.
The mega lottery, what do you think your odds are of winning at the mega lottery? Is it the top prize?
1 in 100 million? I have no idea.
It's pretty close.
Is that close? Okay.
1 in 300 million it's calculated to be. Well, there's a number there that I put down, 10 billion to the 123rd power. 10 billion to the, any of you, if that means anything to you, you're just smiling, right?
1 part in 10 with 123 zeros after it. That's what it means.
No, that's too easy.
Too easy, okay.
Too easy. Take the 10 billion. The 10 billion is 30 times winning the lottery. So if you wanted just the 10 billion part, you would have to win the lottery 30 times in a row, all right? Now, that's what 10 billion is. Now take that number and multiply it by itself 123 times.
Oh, wow.
That's what what they call the initial entropy of the universe had to be
Totally.
at the Big Bang for us to be here.
So fine-tuning is an amazingly powerful piece of evidence. What does it say about a creator? Well, I think we can agree that it says that the creator is highly intelligent to be able to finely tune this to such degrees. I think we can say that the creator is very creative in order to get all of the systems to work and everything to work just right so that billions of years later or whatever, people like us could have a habitable place to live. And purposeful. It shows purposefulness of the creator because all of this was built with purpose in mind, right?
We wouldn't be here, wouldn't have a purpose, it wouldn't be designed. Why is there something rather than nothing, right?
Exactly. So then we talked then about the origin of life and the origin of information. And so could you talk a little bit about what was previously thought there and what evidence we have for the origin of information?
Well, this really blew my mind as when I was in school, I was in physics, and we just knew that Darwin's theory was correct and chemical evolution was correct and non-life would come together and form life. I mean, Darwin himself only knew that he believed that the cell was just a blob of protoplasm. Yeah. Today, with our electron microscopes, we looked inside the cell and then we discovered DNA. That's the most amazing. It's just not a chemical. It's just not an organic chemical. It's a coding system. It's an alphabet. That's why we can...
Like a computer code, perhaps.
Like a computer code, absolutely. So we know that chemical evolution doesn't explain life. Despite what you read in the paper and you see on the Discovery Channel. I mean, these things are... They'll just fade out because that is not what the evidence shows. The evidence shows there's this incredible amount of information within... and each cell, we have 100 trillion cells in our body. In fact, just sitting here, we're losing 1 million cells.
Oh boy.
Don't worry about it.
That's embarrassing up in front, yeah.
There's plenty of bacteria to eat it up.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel better, thank you.
Makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But this DNA strand inside every cell, and it's the same DNA in every cell. That's why it could reproduce itself.
Wow.
But it's 3 billion characters. 3 billion. How much is 3 billion characters? A lot. Yeah, Randy says a lot.
That's a lot
right?
of characters.
If I were to print out just a normal type on my computer, that'd be the instruction manual that's in DNA right there, and it would be as taller than the Statue of Liberty. That's how big that instruction manual goes. That's in every cell. And it's just not characters, it's just not random characters, four digits, A, C, T, and G.
Yeah.
And those 4 characters you can see in the middle makes up the genetic code. And the genetic code is instruction manual. It tells you how to build this particular one, how to build a protein. Mm-hmm. Well, we need proteins, and it has its own database in there. And it tells total instructions on it. So, but here's the key is, where did information come from? Information only comes from mind. Information doesn't come from random characters or random situations coming together. I see I'm getting flashed here, so we can turn that one off. Dave, you want to just flip it off?
Oh,
probably.
It turned off.
Oh, it took care of itself.
Took care of itself. Okay.
Magic.
So life and information. You also talked about the origin of life, the engineering, right? When you look inside the cell, what Darwin thought was just these little pools of protoplasm, probably very simple. Then we actually look inside the cell and we realize it's a city, a factory, right?
Well, that's almost as amazing as the engineering that's in there, because previously we just thought that these cells would assemble themselves. I mean, it's like throw the cells, throw the protoplasm in a bag, shake it up, and out comes life. You know, it's interesting, though. Way back in the 19th century, Louis Pasteur, that name's familiar to everybody, he said life can only come from life. But then evolution came along and said, no, it had to come from chemicals. Well, we're back to life can only come from life. I mean, the evidence is that inside this cell is so much nanotechnology and nanoengineering and manufacturing at an incredibly small. As large as the universe is in that direction, the cell and the nanoengineering goes down the other way. And what these systems are hierarchical systems of system, subsystem, system, subsystem, subsystem, subsystem. All of them fine-tuned.
Wow.
And if anything's out of place here, the cell just dissolves itself and builds up what it's supposed to
Using the information instructions that we just talked about. Yeah. Yeah.
Goes to the table. Oh, I need to create some more skin cells for Greg because he just lost 3.
Yes. Amazing. And so we're talking about information in the cell, or in life, I suppose, and then the engineering. And so what does that say about a creator? So again, circling back to the question we want to constantly be asking this evening, what does this say about the creator? So I think we can all agree that it says that whatever created this information and the engineering is highly intelligent again, highly creative, purposeful again. And you can't deny the purposefulness when you look at, we now see these little movies. You showed one in one of the sessions where there's a little guy that's one-celled, and he's kind of, you can't deny that there's purpose in that. That little thing was looking for something to eat, probably, but there's purpose baked into that. And so we have to say that the Creator is purposeful.
Well, look at the diagram here. What we find inside the cell is a city, literally a city of manufacturing facilities. There's manufacturing, transportation systems that pop into existence, create a road, and then go out of existence again. Power plants that power the cells. And then you need waste treatment facilities to treat the waste that comes after that. Chemical treatment, staging and storage. And it's all controlled by the DNA control room up there, and the instruction manuals.
Amazing. And of course, it would say that the Creator is ordered. I mean, he's the great engineer, I would say, right? Because it's very clear that something engineered all of these systems. So those are the things that we can derive about the Creator from the engineering and the information within a cell. Okay, we're going to move on. So the next session number 4 for this season, We talked about the variety of life. So now we have information somehow, and now we have life somehow. How do we get all of the complexity of plant and animal life on Earth? And again, you can tell us what was previously thought, and then what does the evidence show now?
Well, it's interesting. In the 19th century, we started really understanding a lot of the natural processes that go on in the natural laws. And so it was natural. We want to have a natural explanation. If that's what the explanation is, we're open-minded, right?
Yep.
Not everything is a miracle in that sense. I mean, there's certain things that have been set up that take course of time. And one of these things was the creation of life. Darwin set out, more so than a scientific treatise. His book, Origin of the Species, really wasn't as much a scientific treatise as it was a theory that life didn't have to be a special creation of God, that natural law by itself
was sufficient.
Was sufficient.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate theory, just like we have a God hypothesis.
Of course.
Let's look at the evidence. So, but it really became a very popular article of faith in the 19th century in science that would explain it. And so for the last 150 years, we've been really working on understanding evolution. But what we found now in the last couple of decades is that is a very limited use of evolution. You can have variation within a species or within a family and so forth.
Like the finch beaks or dogs and that kind of thing.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Darwin was a pigeon breeder, for example. You could have 40 different varieties of pigeons. You love the fish, there would be 25 different kinds of fish in one thing, but then she said, all right, now here's a toucan and a pigeon over here. How did one become the other? No, we've never gotten there. People are hopeful that there'd be a natural explanation.
And the more we learn about this, the less likely Darwinian evolution is responsible for that.
There's no workable definition of Darwin's theory. In fact, the most prestigious scientific body in the world is usually considered the Royal Society in London. They met in 2016 and went like this. We got to do something better than Darwin. And
they realized the shortkomings of the theory.
The charge has been given, to go out and find something. What's interesting, though, Greg, we've always talked about an alternative to intelligent design, which is a scientific theory. You can detect design in nature. I mean, something designed or not designed. That's a scientific thing.
Question.
You can go out. That's not allowed to be put on the table.
And
that frustrates me more than anything.
And that's been the mantra really through this whole Socrates at Saddlebrook event. We want to make sure that at least this can be on the table, right?
Put it on the table. I mean, I hear when I have discussions with people, well, there's is Santa Claus the creator? And I just chuckle because where's any evidence at all that Santa Claus can do anything?
Right.
But there's a lot of evidence on that Darwin's theory doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
It's just not workable. So what I wanted to show here is what has happened with origin of species understanding in the last decades. So on the right-hand side is the fossil record. I mean, Darwin's theory was that if we had variation from one species to the next, there had to be intermediate forms because the theory was random variation or random mutation would produce something that had a higher survival characteristic than the previous, and that would then take the place in a population over time.
Okay.
Well, if that's the case, then you should have, in the fossil record, here's one species, here's the next species. There should be something in between. There isn't any.
That makes sense.
And we found out that there isn't any in the fossil record. And then the picture of the monkey to man debate ever since the Scopes trial back in the early 20s, that's just an artist's rendering. There's so little information on this. In our series, we showed the number of bones that they have to put together a theory. They fit in a small shoebox.
Actual bones, yeah.
The actual
and the rest is extrapolation by artists and creative people, right?
This is not sufficient.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have a better explanation except intelligent design is a scientific explanation, and I want it on the table.
Okay, and I think I'm very convinced that this is evidence that points to a creator. And again, talking about what does this point say about a creator? Well, I think we can all agree that the creator is powerful. Think of the amount of biomass that has existed in the history of the earth is quadrillions of tons. So whatever created this must have been quite powerful, highly intelligent, highly creative, and again, we see purpose in nature. And this is, I think, these are attributes of this creator we keep talking about. Mm-hmm. So then we finally went, this is the last session, we went to human consciousness. And so what was previously thought about human consciousness, and what does the evidence show now?
Well, with the idea of man evolving out of it just being an animal, and only matter existing, this up here, this 3 pounds of incredible material was just derivative from natural law.
Of course. That's all there is, yeah.
That's all there is. Gene's not here, is he, Gail? No. Gene sent me an article from his technical magazine they just took a millimeter slice out of a brain. That's a cubic millimeter on a side.
A cubic millimeter.
Cubic millimeter.
Okay.
That's, you know,
a big grain of sand, essentially.
A coarse grain of sand, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Coarse grain of sand. And they were able to calculate the memory, the amount of information it's stored in the human brain in that cubic millimeter. It turned out into what you would think, into the megabytes. We're all familiar with megabytes on our thing.
On the computer, yeah.
But how many megabytes do you think? Take the wildest guess you could possibly.
A million. I don't know.
That's pretty close.
Okay.
A billion.
A billion.
A billion megabytes of information
off by one letter.
stored in a cubic millimeter of the brain tissue.
Wow.
That just didn't happen by chance.
Oh, that is unbelievable.
So anyway, what was thought that mind is derivative. But what really all the evidence is that we have a dual nature, and that's what we spent a lot of time on last time. We have both, and we intuitively we know these kind of things. We know that we're more than just material. We have a soul as well as a brain. So we have a body and a soul. And human beings have a dual nature. They have a material body and a brain, and an immaterial soul and a spirit. We spent a lot of time, even did some James Brown and Little Spirit, rock and roll.
That's true, yes.
And everything.
Exactly.
That doesn't come from just nothing.
We all intuitively know there's something more to us than just the sum of our body, right? There is some kind of a us. There's a me in there.
Well, this me in here is this picture on the left I'm trying to get across here of consciousness. What is consciousness? Mm-hmm. Consciousness is really the key into the mind sciences today of the study. And what do I mean by the red arrow and the black arrow, or the green arrow? Well, when I'm looking at that statue there, I'm looking at extrospection. I'm looking at it and I'm understanding the physical aspects of those light waves coming into my eye and the brain and all that.
Interprets it, yeah.
I'm interpreting that. Yeah. But what's really going on is, in addition, at the same exact time, I'm doing introspection on that information. I'm the only creature that does it at this kind of level simultaneously. What's introspection? I'm thinking about that statue. Not just seeing the statue, I'm thinking about what's going on in there. In fact, I'm thinking about what's going on. Yeah. I'm remembering that I saw that in Paris. I'm remembering that I was first introduced to Rodin and that statue. In fact, I liked it so much, I bought one. This is the soulish part. We have something much more than just a brain in there. We have a mind that's processing simultaneously. And we went through the Libet experiments that showed that, demonstrated it. We're actually being able to come up with experience now and experiments that demonstrate we have free will.
Free will.
Free will. If everything was determined by chemistry and physics, then everything was just blankety, 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 blank, and here's what the natural law does, I wouldn't have free will. I'd have only the ability to do what my brain state is telling me at the time. But I know I have free will. I know more about my own consciousness and what's going on inside than I do about actually the hard stuff and the material stuff. I know that I am a soul.
Yeah.
I have a body.
Yeah, I like that. We are a soul and we have bodies.
I have a dual nature.
And so, again, based on that topic, that evidence, what can we derive what can we say about the Creator? Well, the Creator is highly intelligent, again, highly creative, purposeful. And I think this actually points also to a personal Creator, because we are made for relationship. We're made for relationship, not just with each other, but with some higher being. That's why 90 some odd people around the world and in history, probably a very high percentage there, believes in some kind of a higher being. And there's only one thing that can really interact and have relationship in that kind of a deep sense, and that is a personal agent.
And that's a good point. And it's not proof in the scientific sense, but it's what the weight of evidence shows and how it's changed over the last 50 years.
Exactly. So we thought it would be really interesting now that, so those are the topics that we talked about over this season. We compiled, now I'm really sorry you're not going to be able to see this. I will try to read this to you, but we thought, let's put them all together into a matrix and see what attributes they all point to about the Creator. So across the top, we have what we just talked about, the beginning of the universe, fine-tuning of the universe, the origin of information, the origin of life, the complexity of life, and human consciousness. And then over on the left, you can't see that at all, but those are the attributes that we've brought up here. Infinite, powerful, intelligent, creative, purposeful, personal. Now, mind you, we did not consult a religion to get those. We didn't consult a holy book to get those. We didn't hear that on a Sunday morning sermon. We derived these attributes from examining the world around us in those areas that we talked about. And guess what? There's a lot more out there that we never even touched on. It's really, really exciting that we can get this level of detail about the Creator simply from studying the natural world.
Okay.
Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit. That's kind of like a nice little bow about where those point in the attributes of God. We're going to talk a little bit about how science and philosophy and theology interrelate. So I understand that they're all different disciplines whose goal it is to seek the truth and discover truth. Right?
Well, that's why they're so exciting, because they all believe that there is truth out there.
Right.
And they all seek to find the truth, but they don't talk to one another anymore. They used to in the 17th century. They used to be very informed. In fact, that's when science methodology first began, when Galileo, Kepler, Newton, they wanted to discover the mind of the Creator. They believed in the Creator. They said, I want to discover the mind of the Creator, so I turned the telescope up toward the heavens.
How did God do it? That's the question they were trying to answer.
They argued, sure, human, but it was in the 17th century. By the time of the 18th century, they hated one another. they fought against each other. The religion fought against this and so forth. They became foes and not. And it's pretty much in that category today. But they stay in their separate spheres. Our science stays in separate, religion stays in it, philosophy stays in it. But they collide. They have to when we get together, right? And go into the public sphere. Then all of a sudden, then it becomes an ideological and a political battle. And nobody's doing I shouldn't say nobody's doing it, but we're doing it anyway.
We're trying.
We're putting them together and saying, let's have a public forum and discuss these kind of things.
And you just mentioned ideology. Again, that's been another common theme through this entire season. Ideology versus evidence. People are ideological, they tend to ignore the evidence. If you're evidential-based, you tend to say, ideology's fine, but that isn't the principal way we find truth. We want to follow the evidence where it leads.
And especially today, it's gotten worse, just as we know in the last 5 years, post-COVID. We just retreat to our sphere. So that's what excites me about the Socrates. We can have these kind of discussions.
So these things should be friends, not foes. And so how are these disciplines practiced in today's society?
Well, here's the three of them. Science is practiced as atheistic materialism. You cannot go into the National Academy of Sciences and bring intelligent design to the table. You can't say, well, maybe there's a God hypothesis and put it on the table. You have to practice it. Even if you were a believer, if you go to church every day, it doesn't make any difference. Just keep your religion at home. Practice it as atheistic materialism. Theology, on the other hand, isn't much better in many cases. Theology, let's just talk about our faith and our dogma and our procedures and so forth. I got my ticket to heaven. I'm a Christian, so I go to church, but if I was a physicist on Monday morning, I'd have to leave that at home.
Yeah.
And if I go into the church, we don't discuss these kind of things in church. We discuss dogma and holy books and so forth. So that's we call that fideism, where you're really just talking about faith and not
only.
reason.
Okay. Yeah.
And philosophy is all reason-based, right? But that's widely ignored in both of these. Stephen Hawking, you heard about, our famous wheelchair physicist. He writes a whole book before he dies, and saying that philosophy is done. Philosophy is dead. And then he goes on and publishes a 300-page book on philosophy.
Yep.
So never the twain shall meet is where we are today with that.
And you in the next, I think science and faith. Okay, so you talked about that. We talked about what attributes of God there are, okay? But what do we mean by God? Can you help us a little bit about some overarching themes about what we mean by God or Creator?
Well, this is probably pretty obvious for everybody here. I mean, everybody has an idea that we're talking about a supreme being, right? The reason that there's something rather than nothing, the primal source of everything. That some say it's the ground of all being. What I like to think about is ask the why questions. I remember my daughter when she was 3 years. Why is the sky blue, Daddy? I give her an answer. Well, why is it blue there? Why is it? Why? Well, you just keep on. That's good. You don't walk away and say, hey, have an ice cream cone, but a lot of us do. But you come to the end of yourself of the why questions. That's where you want to go. You want to go to the end of the why because that's the ground of all being. That's the starting point. You need a starting point. And Carl Sagan was famous in his Cosmos series, and that's been, in the last 10 years, even regenerated under Neil Tyson. And he says the cosmos is all there is, all there ever was, all there ever will be. But what he's saying is that's his God. I mean, there's nothing outside. He doesn't know there's nothing outside. That's his ideological position. Yes. So everybody defines God in certain ways. We're trying to be open that there's a closed system, yes, called the universe, but there's no reason why there's not a transcendent one, too.
And especially when that closed universe has evidence that it had a beginning.
Had a beginning,
right? And is finely tuned.
Outside.
Yes, exactly.
Something had to fine-tune it.
Yep.
And then in all our philosophical and thinking and values, I should say, that we talk about, we need an infinite point of reference. If we don't have an infinite point of reference, then all we have is opinion. Yeah. Somehow we have to, for ourselves, say what that infinite point of reference is. That's what I mean by God. It's the answer to the why question. It's the end of the why questions. Let's put it that way. Okay. I loved St. Anselm's definition back in the 12th century. He said, God is the greatest conceivable being. So if you think you got to the end of your asking the why questions, ask another question. If you can't go any farther, the greatest conceivable being is a good definition of God.
So now we have an idea of what we're talking about when we say the Creator or God. But to learn more about this God, you have to step into theology, right? I mean,
well, you reach limits. I mean, with reasoning and the Enlightenment and so forth, the human mind and humanism, you can only go so far with reason. And that's what philosophy does. It takes you to the end of yourself, then it's a mystery, right? Okay. We're not going to eliminate mysteries through reasoning. So at least we know we're at the boundary of asking our why questions.
Of philosophy.
On philosophy.
Okay.
Then in science, we end up, even intelligent design is much, as I enjoy that as a scientific discipline, that maxes out at mind. because it says, that's what
Okay.
you've been saying. You've been saying, well, mind has to be behind all this. Design has to be. Well, then you're maxed out there.
Okay.
So you have
That makes
what in
sense.
theology is called natural revelation. What we see in nature is, but then theology and religions go the next step, special revelation. If we're going to know
Okay.
anything beyond what we max out at, it has to come from the outside.
Okay.
Right? So that's what theology extends this knowledge by special revelation. And each religion has its own holy books, its prophets, its sacraments, its tradition, whatever it is. But that's information allegedly coming from the outside.
What I really like is that philosophy kind of starts at a grand scale and you get down to reason. Reason is the direction for truth. But then science kind of takes over and says, okay, let's narrow it down further, truth. And so what we have been trying to make the case for is that science narrows it down to an intelligence behind everything. But then you got to take another step beyond that because science can't go further. You need theology, just like you said, special revelation in holy books and so forth. You need to investigate the various claims of different theological perspectives.
And you can
right?
do that with scientific discipline or methodology
Sure.
too.
Exactly.
There's history, there's historical analysis, there's literary analysis, there's logical consistency. Are these
Absolutely.
holy books and so forth, are they consistent internally? Are they consistent at the outside? So you can do the same type of analysis.
You can test the claims of every theological system and
I
see
always
if
say,
it stands up.
check it out.
Check it out.
Check it out, test the claims.
So there's 3 different theological systems up on the next slide: theism, pantheism, and atheism. So again, we're trying to wrestle with what actually the evidence does point to. So can you explain what these are and which you think is right?
Well, theism is what we've been mostly used to in the West here, that there's a creation and there's a creator. So that's there, and the Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and so forth define God like we've been here, self-existent,
Traditional
infinite,
theistic worldviews.
traditional things that you
Yep.
think about. In the East, however, is pantheism. Well, what's pantheism? Well, the Greek word for all or everything is pan, so theism. So everything is God. So
The earth, the trees,
the trees,
are all
everything is
God.
endowed with God.
Okay.
So there's no separation between a creator and the created. All is God. And that's the basis of Hinduism, Buddhism. All the variations of other religions can fit somewhere in these categories. And then there's the scientific materialism, which we've been talking about, which is by definition atheistic. Matter, energy, laws of nature is all there is. There is no transcendent God, and that's how science is practiced today. So those 3 give a broad indication of it. And what we've been talking about is theism being the best evidential explanation today. That's what we've dialogued on.
okay. So that is our conclusion, theism, after all of this evidence that we've presented. I think it's a really good place to end. I mean, the hour is getting late. We want to have some time for questions, but we really want what your personal conclusion is on all of this. We understand that we want you all to come to your own conclusions after you have followed the evidence. But Stu, tell us a little bit about what conclusion you have arrived at.
Why I'm doing this is because I got so excited 40-some years ago about pursuing this stuff on my own. And I wanted the answers to the big questions of life, and I needed answers. But it was just more than the science. Being a physics major, it's just more to it than the science. I came to the end of myself. Why am I here? Well, what am I doing? Where did I come from? So meaning and purpose became very, very important to me. How do I find meaning and purpose? Well, I can open up the paper and get meaning and purpose. I can go to a political party and get meaning. I can go to a book and I can go to my friends and get meaning. I needed something. And then I knew that the world didn't have all the answers. I mean, I just came to that conclusion that there had to be some kind of redemption and salvation in the world. I mean, just look at the horrors of. Just turn on the news and you say, yes, something has to save us from this craziness that's going on. I needed that. And then just for everyday living, I mean, just my whole mortal life, what's the best direction? What my values? How do I decide on values?
Yeah.
Do I know? And then thinking about the end of life, where is all this going? What's going to be the status of? Am I just going to lie in the box there? Am I going to go to heaven? Am I going to go to hell? Am I going to go there? Am I going to just dissolve and be one with the universe? I mean, all the different religions had different answers to that kind of thing, and you can pursue them rationally as much as you want, but I had to have a set of answers that came back and fit those categories, and only the transcendent personal creator that you're summarizing for us could give me any answers along that type of thing. I ended up becoming a Christian. It was so funny because I was a hardcore agnostic. I never thought that'd be the last thing I'd ever do, but that one's the one that fit the categories of answers the best with me. It gave me this personal relationship with a triune God, which was really exciting concept to figure out. It gave me a personal relationship with the incarnation of that God in the person of Jesus Christ, as the Son of God. And then it gave me a textbook in the Bible. And until I did my own evaluation for about 3 years, but that was my personal conclusion. But the important thing is what everybody else's, what their conclusion is as they study this kind of thing.
So
I wanted to mention too, this was interesting, a magazine by the name of Salvo Magazine last fall came to me and found out what we were doing at Socrates at Saddlebrook, and they said, that's really interesting. We talk to all kinds of clubs and book clubs and so forth around the world. Would you write an article for us? And I wrote this article, How the Scientific Evidence Led Me to a Divine Encounter, and it's listed at number 9 there. So if you go out to the website, you'll see
it's
my
posted on the
experience
website
with that and the article. You can read the article.
Fantastic. And so I know you also have some advice for people that we should be skeptical of the materialist worldview that is pushed on us. Isn't that right?
Oh, I turned from a skeptic on one side and I went to the other side. I had one of those kind of experiences, and now I'm totally skeptical of the materialistic worldview. And it just leaves me cold to hear Richard Dawkins, and we've talked about this in so many of our sessions.
Yeah.
He says, look at the world and you're left with a universe that's blind, pitiless, and different. I say, geez, that's really encouraging to my heart. I mean, I could live with that one. Those kind of thoughts are just create an existential crisis. There's no reference points, only relativism, only opinion, nothing absolute, nothing infinite that you can cling on to. I mean, even if I'm wrong, just to have that, this is what I believe and why I believe it.
Sure.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then the existential philosophers of the 20th century all saw this coming and said, it leaves you in anguish. They call it forlornness and despair. I know a number of people that are in this category today, forlorn and despair. But everyone must decide for themselves. But even when you decide, if you don't have anything to grab onto, what are the right standards to grab onto? How do you know you've chosen the right values if you don't have something transcendent that goes beyond? So that's, and then this meaning and purpose thing. Only, as you mentioned before, meaning and purpose can only come from another person in relationship. I mean, what is love? What is life without relationship? I don't want to be in a box all by myself. I go crazy. I have to have a relationship.
Of course.
Yeah. Only persons can confer that kind of thing. This book is up back on the back table, which I really recommend for anybody. Viktor Frankl, if anybody's heard of Viktor Frankl, called The Man's Search for Meaning. What a fascinating story of his life. He, a Jewish psychiatrist in Nazi Germany, put in the death camps for 3 years. And because he was a go-to guy, everybody in his little cabin and everything came to him, and 90% of the people would just perish because they had no meaning. They had no higher purpose at all. And he concluded with only those people that survived those experiences is because they had a higher purpose in life. They had a meaning, but meaning and purpose could only come from being conferred. Now, not everybody became a believer in a triune God like I did, but the people that had thought about their wives, for example, what they would get out of. They had a higher purpose to live, to get out of this camp. And that came that way. If they thought about their children, or they thought about going back to their profession like he did. He wanted to go back and write a book, which he did on his experiences with all these, about the concentration camps. And he came to the conclusion, what the whys and how of life and love can only be found in God. And he wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I loved his quote in the book there. He said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how."
Wonderful place to end. Thank you, Stu. Appreciate that.
So once again, we're going to open it up to questions, but I'm going to give the first question. And let me explain it a little bit. A couple years ago, I borrowed a book from a good friend of mine. I'm a chemist, so I'm a scientist, retired. And the book was The Physics of the 20th Century. Sounded dry, but I loved it. It talked about all the theories of the 1900s that came and went. They're no longer theories that are accepted by physicists. There are a couple that still are. It also branched over into the 1800s a little bit and into the 20s. We now know that physicists change just like anybody else. New theories come, old theories go. You've talked about new science in the last 50 years pointing more and more and more to the evidence of a creator, and I get that. My problem still is, when we don't understand that, do we still fall back onto saying, I don't understand it, it must be God?
Well, that's a very good question. It's called God of the gaps. And that's really one of the criticisms that materialism has for any kind of theological or intelligent design answer, is that we just plug God in as an automatic answer. But there has to be, there's either science of the gaps, or there's philosophy of the gaps, or there's a God of the gaps. So you have to pick one or the other, because you end up with a why question, which is a mystery of some sort. So the only way you can get around that is what we've done in this series is let's look at the evidence that philosophy could give, science could give, or theology can give, and pick the one that has the best evidential history. And the one we talked about in this series has the best, God has the best evidential weight. So it's the clearest definition, or the simplest definition, or the simplest answer, let's put it, to the why question that is a mystery.
Someone handed me this question, and it builds right on top of this. The evidence you've given does not prove that there's a creator. It points to a creator.
Yeah, I can't. I love that film. I said this before, Rudy, if anybody seen that, and this guy that wants to play on the Notre Dame football team that's about this big, and he can't make it, but he knows he's going to play, and he goes to talk to his priest about this, and the priest puts his arm around him and says, son, there's only one thing I know after 30 years of being a priest. There is a God, and I'm not him.
Right. By the way, just for reference, one of my very good friends in the Cleveland area, who was from the Chicago area, went to Notre Dame, was on that national team that with Rudy, and he was one of the tackles, big heavy set guy, and I love him to death.
Could I say something a little bit about the God of the gaps before we move on? I don't think it's a legitimate thing to just plug in God in the gaps of our knowledge. I agree with that. But what I see often out there is that an appeal to some future scientific discovery is plugged in to that. And so people say, well, we don't know now, but surely there'll be some future scientific discovery. And you mentioned science of the gaps. I think that's equally invalid. I think what we ought to be doing is we ought to be examining the evidence that we have available to us now and follow that evidence wherever it leads. Now, will other evidence present itself? Of course. Of course. And maybe there will be a scientific theory someday that better explains it, but we should be looking at the evidence we have available now, and we should be following that and not plugging the gaps in with God or with some future scientific discovery that doesn't exist. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, let's open it up to your questions and your comments. Who wants to start?
Feel free to make any comment that you'd like, too.
Anybody? Stu will give you $1.
There we go. Uh-oh.
Here.
Thank you, guys. This has been a phenomenal experience, and I know you get paid so much.
We get paid in lottery tickets.
There you go. But it's truly been a pleasure to be in your audience all this time. I can't wait for October. It's been a learning experience that take with me to heaven.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that we're starting to talk about is what next season is going to look like. And one of the things that Stu is interested in doing, and how successful we'll be, we don't know yet, is not only to have Stu's background and Greg's background, but to bring in some outside speakers from different universities to cover some of these topics and how these topics are being addressed at the university level, at their university. I think that'll be just unbelievably very interesting.
For sure.
Next, who's next?
I'm reading for someone else. What is the material evidence for a soul?
For who, Tom?
For a
What
soul.
is the material evidence for a soul?
A soul, okay. I would say that what we talked about last session was the introspection that we have of going inside and knowing that there's something more than what's happening in our brain, that there's a mental state that exceeds a brain state, that takes us beyond ourselves. And what a soul is something that's beyond ourselves.
What is the difference between the soul and an advanced intellect? Advanced intellect.
Well, what we talk about with the concept of God as an infinite intellect, all right, the greatest conceivable intellect, the greatest conceivable being. So if there is an advanced intellect, it's advanced from us. It's still in the material world. It's not transcendent. It's not beyond this world. So God only makes sense in the way we defined it here as something that's transcendent, that goes beyond the world, that's not subject to the laws of decay. The article that I wrote, I remember the very basic laws of physics was that something can't be created nor destroyed, yet it's here. So there has to be something outside, right? And second law was the second law of thermodynamics. Everything is decaying. Well, if it's decaying, it had to have a beginning. There has to be something beyond, something transcendent. And can I prove that? No. Do I have a sense about it? Yes. Does all the evidence point that direction for me? Yes. Am I just a material body? No. There's something. Obviously, what's going on is much more than a material body. I have a spiritual nature. I have to explain meaning and purpose. I have to explain love. I have to explain life. I have to explain my values. Those can't be explained by materialism. So either I stay in a materialistic world and have no explanation for it, or I go outside and get a transcendent explanation like we've talked about here, if that's helpful.
This isn't a
Here.
question, but a comment.
But we have to get you on tape. You're a celebrity now.
So, I am a Christian. I'm a social worker. I read and study medicine and psychology. I had a family member who was later stage toward dying and had a vision of her husband. And I thought maybe a little psychotic break. You know, that's the science, right? Kind of psychology thinking. Well, recently I read that in hospice, in medicine, I guess I'm going to label it the soul, patterns are emerging of people having the sense of going home and seeing the loved ones, having conversations with them. If they were isolated incidents, that would be one thing, and they're starting to honor and identify and work in hospice with persons that have that experience in a very honoring way.
Well, wonderful.
Is that the soul? Is that home?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, that's one of the evidences, scientific evidences we used in the last session. You weren't here for the last session. We talked about near-death experience, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the out-of-body experience. It's almost proven that 4% of the population now have these kind of experiences where you don't die, you're flatlined. You have no longer brain waves, you have no longer heartbeat, the blood not circulating in your brain, and we've talked about a particular near-death experience. And these people that have these experiences talk about the very similar things. Yep. They go on to another dimension. They see a bright light. They see a person. They see a tunnel. Even atheists who have had these experiences. One of the world famous atheists, A.J. Ayers, at 74 had one of these, and he came back and they said, "Well, now do you still believe that there's no God?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I still believe it because I want to believe it. I don't want there to be a God." That's.
And there's the ideology emerging.
It's an ideology.
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't want there to be a God.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
I was impressed that the article I read was in the Professional Medscape. I read that, and so it was directives it came from science, telling the doctors to attend to this. That is perhaps a shift in thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned in the last session, we mentioned an author named John Burke who wrote a book called Imagine Heaven. He has studied this for decades and has some unbelievable examples in there of how these near-death experiences, actually people are proved to be flatlined, as you said, and yet they are having an out-of-body experience and they come back. And 4% of the population might not seem like a lot, but that's millions of people. There's a lot of evidence out there that this actually does exist.
We even did some talk in one of the sessions on consciousness, paranormal experiences, where people are locked in rooms and they think about devices, and the other person will they pick it up? Now, a skeptic would say, well, there's explanations for this, but the statistics don't lie. If you expect 1 out of 4 devices to be, or objects to be selected, you're getting 35%. You're getting a statistical variation, solution to something that there's more that's going on in our brain waves and paranormal experiences than materialism wants to admit. Let's put it that way.
Anybody else want to comment? Yes.
It's actually one. Oh, hold it up. Okay, a theological thought and then a philosophical thought. If God wanted us to know, wanted us to have scientific proof for its existence, He would obviously able to do that. But then we would no longer have the common basis for the Christian belief, because in the Christian belief, as Jesus says, if you believe in me, you will go to heaven. So there is personal merit in believing what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So this is my philosophy to, explain. So there is merit in believing, but only if you do not have scientific proof. There's no merit in believing that 2 times 2 is 4. But the other thing is was the nature of God. it's of course related. If he wanted us to know, he certainly would be able to provide us with that knowledge. Now, we are Socrates Club, and Socrates, the two most important disciples were Plato and Aristotle. Plato believed there is what is absolute truth, absolute justice, absolute beauty, all these values, they exist outside. You could say they exist with God, and then some of us are fortunate enough to be closer to it, so we know, and then we can tell everybody else what is right and wrong because we are closer to this absolute truth. And Aristotle, who is my favorite philosopher, said, no, it's not outside, it's in us. We are born with it. We are born with the idea what is right, what is wrong, what is justice, what is good, and what is bad. And I think you can say, if that's the case, then part of God is actually in us. We are born with it. And without taking too much time, the other, which goes in the same direction, John starts out, in the beginning was the Word was with God, in God was the Word. Now that is the Greek logos, and in a dictionary it takes 3 pages to translate logos. Because what it is, when we translated this word, was the Word. Well, the logos would mean the concept of word. Without having words, we wouldn't be able to think, we wouldn't be able to talk, we wouldn't be able to communicate. So that again leads to a word which really makes us human beings as opposed to animals. It comes from God, is with God, is part of God. And part of that is in us. So that's my personal belief.
Yeah, thank you for that. Socrates, as you know, is the father of both of those, of Plato and Aristotle, as far as philosophy goes. And if in the beginning sessions of our forums, we talked about the 4 why questions that both of Plato and Aristotle talked about. We only talk about today in science, what is it and how does it work, basically. Plato said, no, what's its design, what's its form from the outside, like you're saying, the outside. And then Aristotle talked about what's its purpose, and it comes from within. So those 4 questions, I call them the 4 why questions, if we were to ask those in school, wouldn't that be wonderful? Yes. That we'd have conversations about the whys of something rather than just learn what the ideology of the teacher is. So thank you for reminding us that the Greek philosophers gave us that insight.
Thank you. What I learned today and what I listened to is, from a science standpoint, for scientists, they need assurance, a positive reassurance. So their measure for science is it measurable and repeatable over and over again? That's the measure for science. And yet, throughout the ages, science seems to disregard those theorems and postulates that they came up with before have now been disproven. So they come up with a new postulate or a new theorem to cover what the facts actually turn out to be. I find it interesting that the scientist seeks to feel like there is an absoluteness about the world. And the religion has an aspect that what I call, what has been known as the nest of being, that the existence of who we are. and the purpose. So from a scientific standpoint, purpose or meaning has no place within the scientific world. It's an absolute. And so rather than someone that believes in a creator, in a superior being, to have to defend that, I feel it should be the opposite. Science, which has disappointed us, theorems in medicine that have been changed from bloodletting to what we have today. I don't see the scientists apologizing for all the past history of falsehoods. To yet, I find from a religious standpoint or from a creator standpoint, more and more, which is what the inference is, that there is a creator.
Well said. Thank you.
Very well said.
I just happened to be reading in a Billy Graham, Franklin Graham article, came today. Can an intellectual believe in God? Absolutely. But you do not come to God because of intellect. We love him because he first loved us. So a question I would have for my husband, who is an agnostic, atheist, heathen, why wouldn't you believe in God after all of what Stu has presented? What is keeping you from God? You're 82. It's time for these deep questions. Start thinking. And the best I can come up with after he has read some of this stuff is, sadly, he doesn't have a need for God. He doesn't care about these questions. So it is a heart thing. God has created a space in our heart. God is not willing that anyone should perish, but that all should come. But there is the yin-yang evil. There is, sadly, a hell for those like my husband. I'll still pray for him. But that's the question. What is keeping you from God after all of this? He has no answer. He doesn't care.
Thank you, Rita.